Well, I suppose if we start at childhood, which is always a good place to start, isn't it? And so I'm of Portuguese origin, as you can probably tell from my name, and in fact, I'm wearing one of the football tops as well, the soccer tops. And I remember, I don't know, I was about 7 or 8 years old, and being with family, aunts and uncles one summer, and there was a van going around the neighbourhood advertising a bullfight. You still have bullfighting, although it's slightly different to Spanish bullfighting. But anyway, there is bullfighting in Portugal, and you'd sort of see posters on the wall, on lampposts advertising bullfighting and so on. And just the whole thing just seemed completely crazy to me. Why would you chase a big cow effectively and make fun of it? And how was that entertainment and people cheering and enjoying the spectacle, and and I remember discussing it with my family, just being completely baffled by that. Unfortunately, being reinforced by members of my family who felt that was also, completely wrong and a completely archaic thing to do. And then, so growing up in an very urban environment and understanding that it was a dead environment, and how human consumption, human sprawl was taking over what habitats for wildlife, and how we were sort of imposing ourselves, if you like, on the natural world and effectively eroding it. And then essentially, once I'd left university, most of my career, which has been in different fields, but had the same thread, if you like, all the way, which has been, environment and conservation and wildlife and animals. And so, I've been a journalist, and I've worked inside government. I've run, government departments. I've run NGOs, charities, non-profits, and so on. And but it's always been with that theme. And one of the more recent roles I was in was I was the chief executive of the League Against Cruel Sports, which is Britain's leading anti-hunting organisation, which was responsible for the introduction of a ban on fox hunting and hunting of mammals with packs of dogs and so on, which is a landmark piece of legislation, and very, very hard fought for, and something which the hunting industry is still fighting to try to overturn and get repealed. But it's an organisation where we've been having to fight very hard to ensure that the law both stays there, but also is properly enforced, and preferably is strengthened further. It became logical, really, to start the campaign to ban trophy hunting when. In fact, it was I stepped down from the league because actually I developed a rare illness and I became disabled, and so I couldn't sort of stick at a normal job anymore. And I sort of went back to doing some podcasts because I'd started in I'd been a radio broadcaster for a little while and thoroughly enjoyed it. So I thought I'd start a podcast. And one of the things I came across when I was researching a program was how the government of Botswana was going to be bringing back elephant trophy hunting. And immediately I thought, probably in much the same way that many people in America reacted when the whole story of Cecil the lion came out, was, oh my goodness, are people still hunting elephants? I mean, you're talking about bringing it back. Does that mean it has been legal until recently, and other countries still doing it? And of course, the reality is literally hundreds of species that are hunted for fun by trophy hunters every year, just to put something up above the fireplace or in their new trophy room, including some of the world's most endangered animals. But actually, I think the whole issue of whether it's endangered or not is entirely irrelevant. An animal, it's not more wrong to kill an animal, one animal, because it's more endangered than another animal. The whole point is we do not, as humans, have the right to be killing other living creatures purely for our own entertainment. Point blank, full stop, end of story. And then learning about the fact that there's this extraordinarily powerful and well-funded industry which is promoting awards for people who shoot the most animals and in the most number of places and with different weapons, and some of the prizes, like the Hunting Achievement Award given out by the Safari Club International. To get the gold prize, you have to shoot animals from at least 100 different species. For the Diamond Award, it's got to be at least 125 different species. And then there's some prizes that it hands out for people who've shot 300 or more different animals, and so on and so forth. And shooting animals with rifles and bows and arrows and revolvers, handguns, and shooting them on each continent of the world. and have these Oscar-style award ceremonies, as if the people who receive these awards should be lauded and held in great esteem, when clearly they're people who committed atrocities. And we need to get around this whole idea of people talk about illegal wildlife crime. Well, I think trophy hunting is a wildlife crime, and all wildlife crime should be illegal. And really the only difference between trophy hunting and poaching, which a lot of organizations are rightly against, is the giving of a piece of paper. Because poaching is when, let's say, a local African person is banned from killing an animal, a wild animal, in their area, even though they might be very hungry, whether it's for bushmeat or to make some money. But it's absolutely legal for a rich white American or North European to come jetting in from halfway around the world to kill exactly the same animal, just for the hell of it, just for kicks. And it's absolutely correct. There's almost, and I'm not defending poaching, let me be very clear about that, but there's almost a greater logical rationale for poaching than there is for trophy hunting, because at least through poaching, and we live in a capitalist economy and so on, at least through poaching there is an economic motive. There is a financial incentive, or indeed it may be, just out of necessity, because of hunger or poverty. And that's what, poaching is, what drives poaching. But for trophy hunting, it's killing the same animals, the very same animals, but doing it just because, for a laugh, and to be able to, to show off about it, to brag about it, to boast about it, and to fill your home with the heads and bodies of innocent animals who've been slain just to feed somebody's ego. So that's the only difference between poaching and trophy hunting. And people get very het up about poaching. We need to be equally het up, if not more so, about trophy hunting.
You just had gotten your feet wet into this subject. Like, what was most shocking to you? Or can you talk to some of those myths that the average person is just not going to be aware of if they haven't done the kind of research that you've done?
The first thing, so I mean, I've now written 4 books about the subject, and when I was researching the very first one, Trophy Hunters Exposed, that came out in, I think it was May of 2020, and it's almost the research that I did for the very first chapter, which is about the marketing campaigns run by hunting companies. They are using the language of, they're selling a soap product, or they're selling a car, or they're selling another consumer product of some kind. And they're talking about this very excited language about, the adventure, the excitement, and they've got these wonderful bullets that will rip even bigger holes out of an animal. And they're saying as if this is the most normal thing in the world. And as if any of this isn't psychotic, which frankly it is. And this sort of ties into another bit of that same book, where I then actually talk to a number of psychologists and criminologists who actually chart the links between this kind of violent crime against animals and violent crime against humans, and how there are links between trophy hunting and serial killing, child abuse, domestic violence, and some of the most serious crime. And we look at some of the most notorious killers in recent US history, whether it's the Boston Strangler or the killers of the Columbine High School disaster. I mean, they were people who started their criminal careers, if you like, by hurting animals, by feeling the urge to be cruel to animals and hurting them and dismembering them and killing them for entertainment, to amuse themselves. And then went on, to commit these other crimes against people, which were essentially the same. And there are actually some serial killers who were also trophy hunters, and vice versa. So it was. I think the first thing that shocked me was the glibness of the language. I mean, it really felt like, well, they felt that it was perfectly normal to talk about killing animals in this way, and also, I guess it was the sheer duplicity, which you touch upon some of the things that were talked about in trophy leaks there. But on the on the one hand, when they've got a media microphone in front of them, the industry, its lobbyists and the key protagonists, they'll talk about trophy hunting as if they're performing a service to wildlife, and that this is all in the name of the good of conservation. take the microphone away, and when you listen to them and talk to them directly and follow their forums and so on, what they're talking about is the adventure, the joy, the thrill, the adrenaline rush, the addiction. And some of them, and in fact, one of the British hunters my most recent book is called Undercover Trophy Hunter. So I actually went undercover into the industry and I posed as a trophy hunter. And I talked to hunting companies, and I asked them, what deals have you got on offer? And they'd send me stuff, and package deals and great offers, specials that they had on just for this weekend, and it was like selling any other, like a car. And then I asked them, well, do you have, for example, some British trophy hunters who have been your customers who could give a reference, who could give a testimonial? And they would give me the contact details of British hunters. So I then get in touch with them. And I said, hi, I'm a wannabe trophy hunter. And such and such company said that you'd be happy to give a reference. Tell me about your experiences. And they just opened up. And once they thought that they were talking to a fellow trophy hunter, they again talked about the addiction, the thrill, the adventure, the excitement. And, one of them talks about how trophy hunting was like mainlining on heroin. It was so addictive, you couldn't get off it. And this is the kind of language that they talk about when you've got them relaxed, if you like. They're talking from the heart. They're not having to read the PR sheet that's been given to them to say, look, don't talk about how much fun it was. You've got to say that this is all about supporting conservation, as if anyone's going to believe that. But anyway, they keep spouting that. And so, it was the duplicity. The two-facedness of it. On the one hand, when the media is watching, they say one thing. Once the cameras are off, then they really talk and say what they're thinking. And yes, these are very powerful people. There is a lot of money behind the industry, and it's coming from the ammunitions industry, from rifle makers. There's close links between the industry and the NRA, so the gun rights lobby. They're very much one and the same. They're working together to try and stop any kind of, threats to hunting and the use of firearms against animals or people, and they're powerful individuals, like Stephen Chancellor is one of the key donors and fundraisers for Donald Trump, and the former governor of New Mexico, and even the former director of the World Wildlife Fund, were some key individuals, very powerful individuals who are part of the industry. It's interesting, there was a survey done by the Houston Safari Club, and it was part of a marketing thing that they were doing. So they were basically trying to get companies to advertise in their magazine. And what they wanted to show was that their membership were wealthy. Therefore, their products would be seen and advertised with an affluent group within society. And so they did the survey, and they worked out that the average net worth of a member of Houston Safari Club was something like $2.5 million. That's the average wealth. And so we can't think of this. I suppose the one of the things I've wanted to really come across in my books is that trophy hunting isn't about one or two aberrant individuals who go out and do this, and we learn about it on social media, whether it's the Walter Palmers or the Larissa Switlicks and so on. It's not that. This is a powerful, well-funded, well-organized industry who's got major lobbying operations on Capitol Hill in the US, and now they're doing it in the UK, and they're prepared to stoop to these dirty tricks, to these underhand tactics and campaigns to try to thwart the will of the people. Because when you ask people, in whether they're voters in the UK or in the US or in Germany or anywhere else, 85% or more are saying they're against trophy hunting. They want it ended. They think that the whole idea of people being allowed to bring home heads of elephants or bodies of lions or polar bears or cheetahs or whatever, they think it's wrong and should be banned. And yet, because of the money and the influence that these small but very, very influential lobby groups have got, they're able to keep this archaic, cruel, bizarre, and frankly despicable industry still marching on.
Yeah, and I think that your book, at least the one I read, it did a really good job of that, of showing how widespread this is and how well connected it is. Not aware that with Safari Club International, it's not just these dangerous animals, it's giraffes, it's deer, it's these very gentle animals, as well as the canned hunting, where it's like, did you use your expert skill to personally stalk through, these remote areas? But the fact that there are guides that lead these hunters directly to the animal who's unsuspecting, at a time when they're normally sleeping, or like with canned hunting where they're in an enclosure and they are just shot and there's no way for them to escape. Like,
well, you don't have to scratch the surface very far to just enter the world of the utterly bizarre and horrible. I mean, yeah, the hog apocalypse, as they literally call this sport, where you can go to all these ranches just west of San Antonio in Texas, and you can shoot pigs from a helicopter with automatic rifles. I mean, it's mind-boggling, isn't it? But yes, they try to sort of talk about this as if this is some epic struggle between man and beast that's on a fair level playing field, and it's not. These are organized trips where you've got scouts who know where the animals are, can take you to them, and then you're shooting them from 200 meters or more, and you've got a very powerful rifle, a powerful scope. And you, of course, you're a long way away from any danger at all. You're keeping yourself nice and safe, and you've got these big bullets that are going to rip a hole through the animal. And of course, one of the things I'm trying to get people to be more aware of is actually the level of suffering and cruelty that's involved, because we just talk about the shot is taken, the animal is killed, and then it's a trophy on the wall and so on. But actually the reality is, and this is even state authorities in the US have done reports looking at trophy hunting within America, and showing that over half of animals that are shot by trophy hunters are actually injured rather than killed outright. So they're shot, and because some of the times it is because they're being shot from a great distance away, also because they're not generally going for brain shots, which would be the most likely to lead to an instantaneous death, but that might spoil the aspect of the trophy and how it looks above your fireplace. But so instead they try to go for these very complex, difficult to achieve heart-lung shots through the shoulder, which, 200 meters is pretty difficult shot, and then you've got to rely on the animals staying still, there being no wind, etc., etc. So that's why we know, of course, with the case of Cecil, Walter Palmer wanted to get this special prize awarded by Safari Club International, which was just for bow hunting of big game. And that's why when he shot it, he injured it with a bow, but didn't want to then follow it up and put the poor animal out of his misery with a rifle shot, because that would have invalidated his prize. So he was quite happy to just let the animal there and hopefully slowly die from its injuries, and so he could pick up the prize. And they went. They left him. Oh, well, he's still alive. We'll go back, have our dinner, have a few drinks, go to the bar, sleep, and then come back in the morning, see if he's dead or not. And of course, they came back the following morning, and they couldn't actually see him because Cecil had crawled into some bush, but they could hear him. They could hear him literally drowning in his own blood. There was blood in his lungs from the arrow, and he was still alive. And he was eventually shot another time, and he was killed. But the extraordinary suffering, and there are many, many accounts in several of my books. So both in Trophy Hunters Exposed, but then in Killing Game, another book, in Trophy Leaks, I think I'll talk about it, and also in my new book, Undercover Trophy Hunter, where in this case, British hunters are telling me about the blood that was spurted everywhere, and how they would be trying to track down the injured animal, and they found bits of intestines on the bushes, and and how the animal, even though its heart was half blown out and its legs were blown off, it was still running, and they had to chase it. And there was one guy who tells me about how he shot a zebra, injured it manages to run off, and he couldn't find it, although they found some trail of blood, and they happened to see it 2 weeks later. The animal's still alive, it's still injured, it's still wounded, but somehow still clinging on to life. So there was extraordinary and incredible brutal suffering and cruelty and pain. Many of the animals that are shot by trophy hunters, they're wounded, and then they end up dying after a long time through sepsis, through shock, through loss of blood, through the awful damage that's done to their major organs and so on. And that's one of the things I really wanted to try to make people aware of. So this whole myth that they put about that it's manly, and so there's a trophy hunter who but he's one of the world's leading lion and elephant hunters. And he used to be a president of Safari Club International, and now he's set up a fake fake conservation group called Conservation Force, where what he does is he tries to get the American government and other governments to reduce the protections given to endangered wildlife, so hunters have got greater freedom to shoot them and to be able to import their trophies and so on. And he talks when he's got the cameras on and the microphones on, he talks about the wonderful conservation benefits. When they're off, he'll talk about how, for example, he enjoyed seeing the cloud of smoke after he blew up a lion's head when he shot it, and he talks a lot about his elephant hunts and how they make him really thrilled. And he goes on to talk about his very first animal that he killed for sport, and how it had the same sensation as losing his virginity. And then he goes on to argue that all men should have, as a kind of compulsory rite of passage, they should be made to shoot an animal, to kill an animal. And yeah, it's not all dangerous animals, as you say. It's very many vulnerable animals. Zebras are very, very popular. Monkeys are incredibly popular. The vervet monkey is one of the most popular animals for trophy hunters, and they like shooting baboons a lot, and warthogs and so on. But then there's some websites, a bit like Amazon, where you can put in your search terms. So say you're looking for a book on Amazon or whatever, and this is a hunting website where you can buy a hunting holiday, and you put in the animal, you put in where you want to hunt, and it'll give you all the best deals. So it's like Expedia, maybe give you all the greatest, latest deals, including reduced prices and last minute offers, and what's thrown into the package, and how exciting it is, and how you can maybe get 10 animals for the price of 7, and so on and so forth. And it's like, as if this is the most normal thing in the world. And you can buy hunts for some of the most extraordinary animals. I mean, you can buy camel hunts, you can buy squirrel hunts, and of course in the US you also have these exotic farms. So these are places where they've gone and got African animals like zebras, and you can go and shoot them without having to get on a plane and travel halfway around the world. And at some of these places you can ride around in a tank. You can shoot automatic rifles. You can take your kids. You can have your honeymoon there. You can have weddings there. You can have group outings with the corporate executives. So it's like a team bonding thing and so on. I mean, it's like we live in a parallel universe, which is the same world, and one of the most bizarre and insane things that you can imagine. There's nothing brave about trophy hunting. Let's face it, and especially with canned hunting, which is now, there's so much in the US. It's often called high hunt or high fence hunting, and it's very much the same thing. These are animals who can't escape. They cannot escape. There is no sport there. These are animals that are cornered before you even start. And yes, in South Africa, many of these animals, they're bred in captivity in cages, whether it's lions. They even breed tigers to trophy hunt in South Africa. So an animal that isn't even native to Africa, they breed them in cages, smaller cats as well. So you have leopards, you have servals, you have caracals, and so on, and wildcats too. It is mind-blowing. And then you have, there was one British hunter that I was writing about a while ago, and he boasts about how he managed to shoot a lion from the distance of just 8 meters. Well, of course he did, because this animal was completely tame. This wasn't an achievement. This animal will have seen this guy coming up to it and thinking, he's probably coming to bring me my dinner. And it's not got the usual fight or flight instinct of a wild animal when confronted with a potential enemy or adversary. It's thinking, is he coming to bring me my kitty food? And the guy gets up to 8 meters, and the lion doesn't know what a rifle is. And the guy shoots him and then celebrates and poses for a picture as if this is the greatest, bravest thing he's ever done. I mean, these guys, frankly, they're the biggest cowards you'll probably find on this planet.
And, something that really hit me too while I was reading along those lines is, as this seems like it is so widespread, these animals are facing endangerment, some of them. And then with climate change and all of the problems that that is creating for animals, is it more urgent now than it has been in the past that people become aware of what's happening and what has been the impact on animals of this, this normalized hunting?
Well, of course, it's got to be taken even more seriously now. I mean, a couple of hundred years ago, there was 1 million lions. Now there's less than 20,000. So the whole argument that trophy hunting is great for lions is complete nonsense. It's not done a great job for lions, has it? Or for elephants, or for rhinos, or for any animal you can talk about. And, we talk about the precautionary principle of conservation, where a species is facing a number of threats. So any additional pressure is potentially the straw that breaks the camel's back. And if you look at a lot of the IUCN Red List reports, where they talk about the declining status of many species, and also what are the different threats, in so many cases, they talk about hunting as being one of those threats. And some it's a greater threat than in other cases, but in most cases, you'll see hunting, whether it's legal or not, it is on the list. And so we need to be taking the pressures off those species and things that are clearly unnecessary, because at the end of the day, trophy hunting serves no purpose. We've got to be very clear about distinguishing it from, say, subsistence hunting or the acquisition of a product that may be essential for a local community, such as, whether we're talking about polar bears being hunted by the Inuit peoples for fat or for fur and so on. That is completely different from trophy hunting. We're not talking about that. We're talking about killing animals for fun and fun alone. And that serves no human purpose other than to debase us, to degrade us, to make us less worthy human beings. So, it is clearly not something that is essential for human survival. It doesn't meet any critical human need. All it does is to fill people's egos. And these are people who are already very vain. So absolutely, we need to be talking about taking those pressures off. And this is a no-brainer. Lions, the US government is saying that lions could be extinct in the wild by the year 2050. I mean, this is one of the greatest species on Earth. It's an apex predator. It serves such an important role within ecosystems in terms of management of other populations of animals and of entire ecosystems and landscapes. We look at the positive effect of having wolves back in the Yellowstone Park and how it's improved the condition of rivers, for example. And people didn't understand the connections, and now they're becoming much more evident. And we've known for over 100 years how trophy hunting is depleting the gene pools of species. Darwin wrote about this. It's been noted, about the deer in Scotland and in Eastern Europe. It's evident in the records book of Safari Club International. Safari Club International, which is the biggest and leading industry lobby group for the trophy hunting industry, it actually has a kind of a Guinness Book of World Records. So trophy hunters are actively encouraged to shoot the biggest of their kind. So the biggest lions, the biggest leopards, the biggest polar bears, because then they will get their names into the record book, as if this is a great achievement. It has 894 different categories of species and subspecies. There are literally hundreds of the world's biggest lions and leopards and rhinos and elephants and cheetahs and etc. that are in the record book. And companies, the safari hunting companies, they boast of the numbers of records they've helped their clients to get. There's a couple of American companies, well, in fact, more than a couple, but anyway, there's several American companies that have got literally thousands of entries in the SCI record book. They boast about this, how they are literally taking the best genes out of the gene pool of some of the most threatened species on Earth, as if this is an achievement. And if you look at also the records books, they will show how hunters were hunting certain species that were dwindling, and then suddenly there's no more because they've gone extinct. An example being the scimitar horned oryx, which was an animal that was plentiful once upon a time, and then it was dwindling. And the SCI records book has still got records up to towards the end of the 20th century. Now they are classed by IUCN as being extinct in the wild. So extinctions have happened. recently, as well as historically, the quagga, which was a zebra-like animal that once existed in southern Africa, it's one of the species that was wiped out by trophy hunters in the last century, well, in the 19th century, by British colonial trophy hunters. In fact, it was a member of the British family that is thought to have shot one of the last quaggas left in the wild. So we know the impacts that it is having, and it's also a question of quality as well as quantity. So what I mean by that is, it's not just that they're shooting large numbers of animals and large numbers of big animals. They are literally depleting the gene pool. So in the case of lions, we know that the gene pool of lions has shrunk by 15% over the last century. We know that elephants' tusks are becoming shorter. We know that many more adult elephants than a generation ago are tuskless. The industry's response has been twofold. One is that it's had to reduce the bar at which trophy hunters can get their record trophies into the SCI record book, because there aren't enough 100-pound tusker elephants anymore, because they've all been shot, and because of the genetic changes that are happening in the species. So they've dropped it to 90 pounds as the minimum entry. And also the hunting industry is now responding by offering cheap deals on tuskless elephant hunts. So rather than stopping the hunting of elephants and the demonstrable impacts that it's had on the elephant species, it's capitalizing out of it. And it's saying, well, we'll move the goalposts a bit to make it easier for trophy hunters to still go out there and shoot the biggest elephants that are left, and you can get some special deals as well. It's craziness. It is the definition of insanity.
And I'm sure that they were not expecting someone like you to come along and just expose this to everybody. I was very interested. Have you heard from any of the hunters in the books that you've talked to, or have you heard from SCI? Like what has the response been, both from the public and also from the individuals and the agencies that you've covered over?
Well, from the public, the reaction has been pretty similar to yours in that this is almost incredulity at just the depths of depravity that we're talking about, and the scale of the insanity, and the cruelty, and the fact that it is a powerful industry and so on. Because generally people's knowledge of trophy hunting is that it's guys like Walter Palmer and people like Larissa Switlick and Tess Talley who go off and do these abominable things, but it's just a handful of individuals. They don't realize the scale that it's happening. They don't realize how much money is in it. There's a lot of companies that are making literally millions out of this every year. It's a profitable business, and the individual companies that are responsible for shooting hundreds and thousands of animals. And yeah, so I think the public's reaction has been one of shock, of dismay, and certainly it's been interesting in the UK, where obviously, because my organisation is primarily at the moment trying to focus on trying to get the government in Britain to ban the import of hunting trophies. And so there's been a lot of coverage in the media, in the mainstream media. And so there's been a growing awareness of it. And what we've seen is that people were already very against it before we started, and now they're even more against it. So the opinion polling figures. And what's particularly interesting, I thought, was that in the most recent poll that we conducted, it was just a couple of months ago. And so supporters of the current Conservative government in Britain, they are amongst the strongest supporters of a ban on trophy imports. So 89% of people who support the government, the Conservative Party and the Conservative government in the UK, they want an immediate ban. They don't want any more delays. They want it now. And I think it's 87% of them said that this whole argument about benefits, conservation, and so on is rubbish. There shouldn't be any loopholes. There shouldn't be any of these get-out clauses and so on. It should be a complete ban. And these lies that the trophy hunting industry tell are precisely that. So there's been a hardening of attitudes, including amongst people that you might think perhaps were more sympathetic to trophy hunting. So it's very interesting that public opinion is very clear. In terms of the response from trophy hunters and the hunting industry, I mean, they've not contacted me directly, but they do like to say a lot of things about me on social media. I suspect I'm probably not on the Christmas card list of many trophy hunters. And, but yeah, they weren't expecting this. They've been, and I guess that's why this has been allowed to happen and to continue. It's because industry hasn't been put under the microscope. People haven't before looked beyond those individual 6 stories of the Walter Palmers of this world, and looked at, the people who are behind it, the industries that are funding the lobby groups and the lobbying on Capitol Hill, and the fact that, people like the former Senate leader Mitch McConnell and former House Speaker John Boehner and several members of the Trump administration, Sonny Bonner and Ryan Zinke and so on, were people who were in receipt of campaign donations from the trophy hunting industry. And how much money is, and these fake lobby groups that have been created as well, like Conservation Force, which has somehow got its members on standing committees within IUCN, the World Conservation Union, and has got official status within CITES, and they're encouraged to input into discussions as if they're a legitimate conservation organization when they're clearly not. These people don't have any scientific background. They're not biologists. They are trophy hunters. They like shooting lions and elephants. And when they're not sitting in IUCN meetings or CITES meetings, they're bragging about the polar bears and the leopards that they've got in their trophy rooms. And so, the duplicity, the fact that they are quite happy to engage in the dark arts. And yes, you referenced this before, how this fake news campaign that was run by a Republican politician in Arizona, I think it was, that set up these fake pages and organizations on Facebook and on Twitter and so on, purporting to be the voice of Africans. In fact, it's one Republican politician out in the Midwest, and it ended up being shut down by Facebook and Twitter, in probably the strongest action that they've taken to that. But this is going on all the time. They're funding these some of these politicians and scientists as well to put forward their views and make it seem as if it's a legitimate case for killing animals for conservation. When of course logic tells us that is the most bizarre thing, most counterintuitive thing you could possibly think of. So yeah, I think that the reaction of the industry is they don't like the the visibility and the scrutiny that they've been put under, and they would probably rather I wasn't around. But it is so important to get beneath the surface and to understand the full story and to understand the impacts and who these people are and what drives them and how they operate, so that people can, politicians primarily, can have the full picture, so that they can make decisions, whether it's legislation, regulatory changes and so on, based on the facts, based on the real evidence, and so that the public, the general public and voters, can make an informed decision as well. That's essential to a proper, healthy, functioning democracy.
Very well said. And I think the fact that you're not on their Christmas card lists, like, that is something to be proud of, right? Like, not shooting an elephant in an enclosure, but, just this level of achievement. Like, I have your book. I read it. I loved it. And, just the depth of the detail and the research. I know that you mentioned the media and reviews of this book and it having this audience. And, some of the comments that I read from it was that, to quote, "This is the most thoroughly detailed and data-driven expose of its kind," and I'm just super interested. Can you tell me about your process? Like, how many hours of research went into this? How did you stay organized? Just like, how did you take this from idea to, 4 books, essentially? What did that involve?
Well, there was different objectives behind each book. So Trophy Hunters Exposed, which was the first book, was very much an introduction to the trophy hunting industry, and actually letting people know that there was an industry and how it works in terms of marketing these hunting holidays, how it works in terms of these lobby groups that they create and how they're funded and where the money's coming from and where it goes to, which politicians' pockets it's ending up in. The campaigning tactics, the fake organizations. And so it was to sort of open people's eyes to the fact that there was a whole big story behind just, the individuals that we know about, like Walter Palmer. And also just that they don't just shoot 1 or 2 animals, that some of them shoot hundreds and even thousands of animals. I think I talk about Ron Thompson in there, who's shot 6,000 animals. About 5,000 were elephants. I mean, there's Tony Sanchez Arena, who's a Spanish hunter, who again has shot over 1,000 elephants. He shot 350 lions. He shot hundreds of rhinos and buffaloes and leopards as well. And all of the prizes that some of these hunters have. So it was a sort of a broad brush introduction to, if you like, you thought trophy hunting was this, is the likes of Walter Palmer. You know what? Actually, it's worse than that. So that was the objective of the first one. The second book was Killing Game. And that was much more looking at it from the animal's perspective and from the conservation perspective, and looking at some of the big species that we know about, so lions and elephants and cheetahs and leopards, but also looking at some of the other animals that are part of the menu of hunting companies. And I say that because it is like a menu. You go to some of the websites of these companies and they have a list of, what you can order from. And actually, some of them you can also order off menu. You can ask them, well, do you have a meerkat? Do you have a pangolin? And in some cases, they'll say, yeah, we can arrange that. Or, if it's not on our estate, we can fix that through somebody next door. So it was, looking at primarily the conservation evidence, because we hear time and again the industry trying to say, yeah, but we're doing this for the animals, and it raises money for anti-poaching patrols, and on the one hand those arguments are totally disingenuous, because all they're saying is, well, there may well be some money going towards anti-poaching patrols, but they're doing it so that poachers aren't killing the animals that they're not paying for, so that wealthy Americans and Brits and others can come and pay big bucks to shoot those animals, and so they pocket the profit. So it's completely a self-interested argument. But also then looking at the real data and reports that have been written by the UN, in some cases even by hunting organizations, where they show that, well, actually the amount of money that even hypothetically is generated by trophy hunting that might end up in some kind of conservation project are negligible, are risible, are totally laughable. And the claims that it goes to help and support local communities, ditto. It doesn't end up in local communities. It's just complete whitewash. So it was, exploring all of those arguments and looking at those who are making those arguments and whether what their credibility was. And of course, the fact is that these are people in many cases who are hunting lobbyists. So they claim to be scientists or conservation. Actually, they're not anything of the sort. They are people within the hunting industry. Or in the case of some researchers, they are people who have taken hunting industry money and have, who have almost depended in some cases on the funding of the hunting industry. So that was important. So that was the second book. And as I say, so first book was about, here's an introduction to what it really is. It's not just Walter Palmer. Second book is those arguments about conservation, really. And then Trophy Leaks then kind of picks up on the theme about the industry and how it really drives a mass killing of animals and a killing of the biggest animals that are most important to the survival of species. So you have those industry awards, and Safari Club International has got 80 different awards that and it encouraged, and some of them it's a bit like a computer game or an arcade. So you have to sort of shoot a certain number of animals to get through to level 2, and then to get to level 3 you have to shoot even more animals, and then level 4, etc., etc. So it kind of encourages, and it has they actually talk about a pathway to help a trophy hunter map their hunting career to go and shoot these animals in this place and shoot more animals, and then shoot more animals with different weapons as well, and so on. So showing how these industry awards are driving the shooting of lots of animals. And then the records book, how they actively encourage hunters to shoot the most important animals. These are the ones that literally species depend on in order to survive the rapidly changing environment. You need those genes. Elephants' tusks aren't just for showing how big and beautiful elephants are, and certainly not for selling on the black market. They serve a purpose. They're particularly important for helping elephants to find water under dry riverbeds during the drought season. Well, of course, with climate change, droughts are becoming more frequent, they're becoming more fiercer and more prolonged. So both the knowledge, if you like, the memory of those bigger elephants, plus the fact that they've got those bigger tusks, is even more essential to keeping those elephant herds alive in different parts of Africa, and so on. So that was the third book. And the fourth book was very much written with the current UK debate in mind. And what I mean by that is, the government is proposing to bring in a bill. And we know about some of the notorious American hunters, and even in Britain, generally, when you ask, have you ever heard of a trophy hunter, or if you think of trophy hunting, who do you think of? And people think about Walter Palmer and Tess Talley and so on. They don't think about the fact that there are British trophy hunters who have killed lots of animals, and there are British trophy hunters who've shot black rhinos, one of the most critically endangered animals on earth, who talk about going on 30 or more different African safaris. And also that Brits, in some cases, are the heads of some of the biggest hunting companies in Africa. So they are responsible for shooting some of the largest and the most magnificent species and the largest numbers of animals as well. And so it was really trying to get to across to primarily policymakers, but also the general public, is the fact that, Britain, yes, invented, if you like, modern day trophy hunting, but just because it stopped being a colonial power doesn't mean it stopped being a trophy hunting power. British trophy hunters are some of the biggest trophy hunters in the world, and British businessmen and businesswomen are the owners and run some of the biggest and most profitable and most devastating trophy hunting companies in the world. So it was really saying, this is a really important issue in a British context. That was the purpose of this most recent book.
Gotcha. Thank you for explaining that. That's helpful. I have kept you for almost an hour. I have just 2 more questions if you're okay on time. This next one is kind of a fun one, but I read that you're an animal assisted therapist and you're also very passionate about permaculture.
Oh, yeah.
I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about, how does that keep you grounded, or how else do you stay sane when you're having to get to this level of depth into these very disturbing and sickening things and looking through these records? Like how do you stay connected to the earth, to animals, to what matters, to your own sanity? Like, can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Well, I have a small farm in Portugal. It's mainly a cork farm. So, the corks that go into bottles of good wine, and so it comes from the bark of the cork oak tree. You hand peel off the outer bark, the secondary bark, every 10 years, and the bark grows back, and the trees go on to live 200 years and so on. So and it's a very sustainable form of farming, because you're literally only intervening once a decade or whatever, and maybe do a little bit of management in the meantime, and it's incredibly wildlife rich. And I've managed my little farm in such a way as to encourage wildlife, and so there's no hunting goes on. And what I do have is trail cameras around the place, so camera traps which film passing wildlife. And so I'm aware of and thoroughly enjoy seeing the photos and the film clips of a lot of the animals that I have on my land. So, occasionally I see wildcats, but I have, badgers, and I have genets and Egyptian mongoose and beech martins, and I have some eagles of different species as well. And just seeing these creatures thrive, and some, breeding and bringing their new kits into the world the following season, that keeps me in perspective. And you know what, it keeps me in perspective in a broader sense as well, which I think sort of drives what I do. And that is, we humans, we behave as if we are the supreme beings on earth, but we're not. We're one amongst billions of species, and no species has a greater or lesser right to exist and to live in dignity and peace than any other. And living in that environment, and most of my books have been written whilst I've been there. So it's great because it's very quiet, except for the birds and the bees, and it constantly reminds me that we are one of many that's in a complex web of life, which involves so many different types of fauna and flora that all depend on one another. And that we as humans need to learn to live with respect and humility in the natural world, because all of the big challenges that we're talking about in society today, whether it's climate change or the sixth extinction, the mass extinction of species, the loss of biodiversity, they're all driven by the fact that we put ourselves first and that we think that we have the right to consume natural resources as if they are inanimate matter or objects. And trophy hunting very much fits into that mindset. In many ways, it's the worst manifestation of it. And so in some ways, my hope is that if we fully and truly grasp what is wrong about trophy hunting, then perhaps we can make the changes in our attitudes and behavior, which will help us to address more fully these other problems that related to our ecological footprint, to the impact that we have on other living systems and other living creatures. We talk about the climate crisis as if this is an environmental problem that has only started happening relatively recently, or that environmental issues have only become important recently. Well, the disappearance of mass species and mass populations of species happened before the industrial era. And it was before we expanded so much as a human population on Earth, and before we developed many of the machines and tools of destruction, if you like, that we have at our disposal today. So it's something about our attitude throughout history. There's something within, if you like, the human psyche, the human gene pool that we need to address. It's as if you like, we need to engage in some cognitive behavioral therapy about our engagement, our relationship with our natural world. So the long answer to your question is it has helped me to put me in my place, to make me see just how important stroke insignificant I really am as an individual, and what the human race is. We are no more or less important than the soil organisms or the insects or the great predators. And we depend on them, they depend on us. And it's only if we understand and find a way to live truly in harmony with other living things, without thinking that they are resources for our exploitative use only, that we will survive and thrive in amongst these very pressing challenges that we've now finally started to wake up to.
It's really powerful. And it segues perfectly into the last question, which is, what can people do? Like, what can people do to help raise awareness? Can they contact their legislators and, ask for this ban? And we're based in the United States, but we have an international audience. So it's like, what would you like to say to our readers about how they can help you raise awareness about what's going on?
You've said it there, is about contacting the legislator. That is by far the most important thing that anyone can do. Because at the end of the day, they watch their mailboxes, whether it's their email inbox or the post bag, and what comes in through the door. And actually, it's more powerful, even more powerful, if you go and directly meet with them, or if you pick up the phone to them, or if you write a letter and mail it, stick a stamp on it, put it in the post, because that shows even greater, if you like, concern on your part that you've gone to those lengths than just sending them an email or signing a petition. And there's a mindset that I think we need, another mindset change that we need to have, which is about our relationship with our legislators. We are often quite cynical about them, or we feel powerless. They are the people who are very important and they don't listen to us. Well, at the end of the day, our legislators are hired by us, in the same way that we might hire an electrician to come and do a job for us, or a plumber to come and do a job for us. We've employed them to write laws to make society function on our behalf. So we give them a 4-year contract or whatever, 2-year contract, 5-year contract, and then we renew it if we think they're doing a good enough job, or if they're not, we fire them. That's what elections are. And we pay their wages. Through our taxes, we pay their salaries. So they are literally our employees doing as we wish. And that is the mindset that we need to adopt. They are not above us. They are there to serve us. And so it is really about taking control of that and our relationship with our legislators, and saying to them very clearly, so I've put you in office, or I'm going to be considering whether to extend your contract at the next elections. And I want you, as my employee to be doing this for me. And that is to be speaking out or producing a bill or supporting another bill to do with trophy hunting. And my vote is dependent on whether or not you do this and do it to my satisfaction. That is so crucial. It's that taking of control of the relationship with your elected politician, your democratically elected politician. And secondly, it's about then doing that. It's about contacting them. It's going to see them, whether it's on Capitol Hill or back in the state where they are elected, back in the district, or in the UK, going to see them in Parliament or in their constituency surgeries, which they'll hold in your local area every week, usually a Friday evening, sometimes a Saturday morning. Check their website. And, you can just pick up the phone to speak to your MP by dialing the Parliament switchboard number. I know the number if you want. It's 0207 219 3000, and then ask to be put through to your local politician. And if you don't know who your local politician is, there's a couple of websites that will tell you. You can go to writetothem.com, or you can look them up on theyworkforyou.com. So you can find out who your politician is. You can pick up the phone to them and say, "Hi, I'm so-and-so, I live in your constituency. I'm thinking about who to vote for next time. And this is what is really important to me." And they have to listen to that. I used to work in the parliamentary system in the UK. In fact, I used to work on Capitol Hill. And I know for a fact that politicians are constantly watching their mailbox. They want to know what's driving, concerning, worrying, or angering the people in their district, the people in their constituency. Because at the end of the day, they need to be able to demonstrate that they're responsive to those issues, or that they run a risk of being booted out of office if they're not doing that. So take control of the relationship with your legislator. That's point number one. Point number two, pick up the phone or write to them or go to see them. Get in touch with them. That is what democracy is about. They're there to do your bidding. Get them to do your bidding.